Committee could not be here today. He sends his regrets. This is our second meeting following one that occurred back in the summer months. And let's begin now by seeking the confirmation that we do have a quorum.
We do have a quorum, and the press has been notified.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thorne, for that. Why don't we just take a moment to go around the table and say who you are and what organizations you represent? Winston?
Yeah, happy. First of all, let me welcome you all here. For those of you that are here for the first time, a special welcome. For those of you who come back for the second time or maybe multiple times, again, welcome to you all. Thank you all for being here. I'm Winston Miller, and I'm the Executive Director of the Kentucky Housing Corporation.
Wendy Smith, I'm Deputy Executive Director over Housing Programs here at KHC. And a special thanks for those of you who made a drive. Some of you made quite a drive in this morning.
I'm Nikki Chambers. I'm with the Housing and Human Rights Commission and the Christian County Chamber of Commerce.
I'm Earl Rogers. I'm the attorney in Moorhead, Kentucky, and I'm the director of Frontier Housing.
I'm Sandy Curd. I work with the economic development firm Kentucky Highlands Investment Corporation out of London, Kentucky. We also have an affiliate of Highland Housing.
I'm Ben Womack. I'm a loan officer at People's Bank of Kentucky and also a director there.
I'm Tiffany Marthaler, and I am the Executive Director of the Kentucky Affordable Housing Coalition.
I'm Carrie Kendall. I represent Kentucky Housing Corporation. I'm the board liaison.
Sam Thorner, I'm the General Counsel for Kentucky Housing Corporation.
Curtis Stauffer, Kentucky Housing Corporation, Managing Director of Housing Contract Administration. Half of my team oversees single-family homebuyer development and is administering the RHCF funds.
Kay McAfee, a Housing Policy and Program Administrator, also support housing programs and special projects.
Mary Beth Smith, Disaster Recovery Programs Administrator with Kentucky Housing Corporation.
Okay.
Molly?
In the corner.
Oh, I'm Molly.
She thought she could hide.
I'm Molly Tate. I'm the Managing Director of Communications and Marketing Services.
Next on our agenda, we have an update from Ms. Wendy Smith.
If I may, before we go to Wendy, something that is not on the agenda but should have been is an approval of the minutes from the last meeting. I apologize for that.
Very good. Do we have a motion for the approval of the minutes from the June 13th meeting? We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I think Earl, I heard you first, just by a unanimous second. All in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have approved the minutes.
All right, thank you. Apologize for the miscommunication.
Okay, and you've got it printed out too, so yeah. Well, good morning again. My aim is just to give you all an update from our meeting in the summer till now, kind of what's taken place. KHC definitely felt like part of our charge was to move quick to get these dollars, get programs set up, get the administrative regulations approved by the legislature, and then get these funds out so they can help with disaster recovery. And that there was an urgency to that. So I'm here to share with you all that we've made a lot of progress. So next slide, please. So just to remind you all, the legislation that created the Rural Housing Trust Fund and reprogrammed some funds to put into it, $20 million to put into it from the SAFE funds, that was back in really at the end of March. I think it was the 27th or 30th. It created the funding that flowed into the Rural Housing Trust Fund and the Rural Housing Trust Fund, two separate pieces of legislation, but related. Next slide, please. And then just to remind you, the available funding was $20 million, and 10 for Eastern Kentucky, 10 for Western Kentucky, basically for disaster recovery. So while the legislation that creates the Rural Housing Trust Fund goes well beyond disaster recovery, it can be for any kind of housing development for folks earning middle incomes and below. This initial funding is just for disaster recovery. I hope that distinction makes sense. It's like other funds might flow into the Rural Housing Trust Fund, but the only funds currently in it are for disaster recovery, so they are pegged to the Eastern and Western Kentucky declared counties. And again, it's 10 million and 10 million. For Eastern Kentucky, we're focusing all of it on single family development because most of the housing lost were single family homes, even if they were trailers or rentals. In addition, in Western Kentucky, we split it, 5 million for single family, 5 million is gonna be for multifamily, for a couple of reasons. In Western Kentucky, after the tornadoes, we lost a lot of rental housing, single family rental housing, but also multifamily. In addition, most folks in Western Kentucky had homeowners insurance, and homeowners insurance covers tornadoes. Few folks in Eastern Kentucky have homeowners insurance, and if they did, it doesn't cover floods anyway. So there's just a greater need for that single family recovery in East Kentucky versus West Kentucky. So just that's the rationale behind the allocation of the dollars. Okay, and these are the counties. Let's go to the next slide. I'm just refreshing. There's a map of the counties, and those that are kind of darkest in East and West are the priority counties, the areas that were hit hardest by the tornadoes and the flooding, and where we kind of gave preference if we got applications to serve those counties. And then this is just to give you all a sense of the income limits. The legislation allows RHTF to serve households earning up to 120% of the area median income or the state median if the state median is higher. And this is just a sampling. It's just to give you all a sense of we can potentially serve households well above what KHC programs typically serve. We typically focus on folks earning 80% and below, and sometimes even lower depending on the program. So it's a great flexibility because the disasters didn't really care if you were middle income or low income. A lot of folks need some help or have a gap in their insurance, what FEMA offered them, what have you. Next slide. Okay, so here's the progress that we've made, and this is really why I'm up here, is to share this with you all. So in March, the legislation was created. In April, we drafted our program guidelines. In May, we did a number of webinars to get feedback from our partners in East and West Kentucky, and with our multifamily partners across the state. In June, you all met for the first and only time before this meeting, the Rural Housing Trust Fund Advisory Committee. In July, we released a notice of funds available for single-family projects. So those are projects to repair and rehab existing houses and to build new houses in those disaster recovery areas with a preference for rehab and repair. That's only for survivors of the disasters. The new construction, first preference, has to be for a survivor, but we're not going to have an empty house sit there unsold. Eventually, it'll be just for sale to any eligible household. And what we are happy to report to you all is that in October, so earlier this month, we announced $13.5 million in awards to East and West Kentucky for single-family projects. Next slide, please. And so these single-family projects, and Curtis Stauffer introduced himself, it will be one of his divisions that oversees and administers getting these grant agreements out, overseeing them, triggering inspections, all that kind of stuff. It's for those two uses. It's home repair, recovery, and reconstruction. So it's housing solutions for disaster survivors. And then the development of brand new single-family homes that will prioritize survivors, but it won't be exclusive to survivors. Because one of the things we know is these markets had a shortage of housing units before their disasters. It's been exacerbated by the disasters, and we want a preference for survivors, but we know getting more units to the market will help survivors. It will just help with supply, with affordability, and all that kind of stuff. Next slide. So you all have a larger version of this if the slide printout is too small. I just handed that out recently. Just giving you all the breakdown of our awards, again, just announced this month, to partners across East and West Kentucky. All of the partners on this are nonprofits. We did not limit applicants to nonprofits. Local governments could apply, for-profits could. We did not get any applications from any of them. I think the reason for that is we wanted to move fast, so we did not spend a bunch of time doing capacity building to get folks ready to apply. These dollars are meant to get going as soon as possible and be, shovels in ground or rehabs getting going on existing houses as soon as possible. So the breakdown, I'm not going to go through them all. I will share with you all that to the extent an organization got a tiny amount, you will see in Beattyville and with Daniel Boone, their requests were very modest. They only asked for a very small amount. What you will see, though, is that two of our biggest partners who are really being looked at for Eastern Kentucky housing recovery, Homes, Inc. and Housing Development Alliance, they got the max award, which is $2.5 million. That we never grant that much for single-family development with any other program. It's a very sizable amount, very flexible, and the dollars can recycle, so they can use 100% of our money to build the house, and then when a mortgage comes in or what have you, they can recycle a portion of it for some of the work that they'll be doing. Frontier Housing is another big partner of ours, and you will see they got a sizable award. Partnership Housing is a really solid partner. Their ask was just lower. They're not in as impacted a county. And so the other thing I want to note is you'll look down for Western Kentucky, Community Ventures, which is actually out of Lexington, but they're really statewide. They are setting up a Western Kentucky disaster recovery kind of team and have reallocated one of their executive team members to focus on Western Kentucky. And they got over the 2.5 million amount because a county that is going to partner, I think it was Fulton County, with Community Ventures also applied because they were worried that one or the other might get told no, and so, but they asked for a very small amount. So what we said to that county is, we will just increase Community Ventures grant amount by the amount you've asked for, and it'll all go to one. It's easier for us, and it's easier for the local government to have a known partner, use the funds.
And I will add that in the Fulton County application, I identified Community Ventures as their developer that they were going to use regardless.
They were already planning to work with Community Ventures, so to us it just made sense. Let's just give it all one grant agreement, one bucket of funds, and not have to. But they do have to set aside a portion of those funds to go into Fulton County. And then the Housing Partnership, Inc., also a nice sizable amount, almost $2 million. They are looking at doing some manufactured or modular construction, which we're really happy about. I will also note that Frontier is looking at, they're not going to use this money to create the business model, but they put it in their application. They are looking at a kind of an alternative construction model whereby they would build, it's kind of like a giant carport where they would do construction underneath it, so it's out of the rain. It's not like a factory though. And they would build kind of these modules, if you will, like cubes, and the main core has the kitchen and the bathroom and some common area, and then it's very easy to add bedrooms to it. You can even build a 2-bedroom and then add more bedrooms later. And they get trucked out, but they are a stick-built home effectively because it gets fixed at the foundation, it's all stick-built, and the electrical and all that stuff gets tied together on site. And some of our other partners in East Kentucky have mentioned that if Frontier gets that ramped up, they would like to buy those modules so that they can just build faster, right? Because we need a lot of units brought to market pretty quickly. So we were really happy to see some innovative approaches across some of our applicants. Yeah.
Wendy, the Daniel Boone Community Action Agency, are they partnering with their affordable housing agency, Mountain Housing, or are they doing,
DBCA is an independent developer as well.
Yeah,
they've had a long-standing single-family development program under Martha Dobson's leadership for like 15, 20 years at this point.
Okay. Did Mountain apply?
Mountain did not apply.
No. And they have one family they are trying to help, so that is why they just sought that amount.
They have a particular disaster survivor that they've been working to assist since the flooding, and this was the best opportunity they identified for that household.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I noticed that it's only $5 million, so Western Kentucky, are those mostly single-family homes?
All of this funding will be single-family housing.
This is all
of this. We have not done we hope to soon do, well, you're stealing my thunder, I have a slide on it. But this is all single-family housing. And we really, so typically we do a funding round if you want to do home repair and rehabs with existing homeowners, and we do a separate funding round to build homes. And the money can't be moved, it's not fungible. We took a different approach with this because we know there could be some folks where you think you're going to rehab their house and you get in there and you're like, there is no way, and you're in the floodplain, and we really need to build you a new house. You cannot stay here. And we didn't want to have to do a lot of paperwork and bureaucracy of reprogramming dollars. So folks get one grant amount and they get to, obviously we ask them to identify how many new and how many rehabs, but we made it clear that the money is fungible. And what they do is they send in what we call a setup, which is for each household or each home build, they will give us here are our projected costs, here's what we think the price is going to be or the rehab costs are going to be. And that is when we'll actually know what the real numbers are, because we know some folks are going to move from the repair rehab category potentially over to new construction. It's just going to happen.
And have they redrawn flood maps in these areas?
It's underway, is my understanding.
Yeah, it varies location to location. There are preliminary maps in most of the southeastern counties, not all of them. Unfortunately, the preliminary maps were based on data and analysis done prior to the floods.
Yeah.
So even the new maps are not going to be particularly accurate. So this is something we're going to struggle with as we work to assist these communities recover from housing. So we might be using known flood lines for the disaster itself as something to gauge risk. But the FEMA maps are not, unfortunately, not very accurate.
Did they grow significantly?
I haven't had a chance to compare in detail the maps that have been proposed because they are not in effect as of yet. But in doing some quick comparisons for some sites I've looked at for doing some environmental reviews, there's not significant changes from what I've seen.
Mm-hmm. But we, just to remind you all, per the discussion we had in the summer with this body, one of our policies is we will not do any RHTF work, repair, rehab, or new construction in the floodplain. So this is not meant to assist those households. The coming HUD Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery money can assist folks in the floodplain with very specific rules in place, but we did not want to do that with these funds. So next slide. So I just thought I would give you all like some images of what some of this work will look like by some of these partners. So this is Gurney's Bend. It was done in Hazard by Housing Development Alliance, one of our awardees. It's 15 houses just outside of the city of Hazard. I'm really just trying to give you all kind of a picture about what some of the projects might end up looking like. Next slide. We also have a lot of our partners already do home repair with other KHC funds. So they will do, these are pictures from other home repair projects that they've done. I wanted to let you all know we did get some press from this, both stuff that we generated, the governor generated, or that our partners. And so Community Ventures did a press release just expressing their thanks for these funds and how much they can do for them. Brenda Weaver is the person on their executive team who has been designated to work on Western Kentucky disaster recovery. It's kind of a new or shifted role for her. Next slide. And then the Housing Development Alliance just let us know that they weren't sure what they would do without these funds, that these are really going to make a big difference in them continuing. They're already building houses and repairing houses for folks, but their money is drying up and the HUD dollars have not become available to Kentucky yet. Okay, so coming soon, we will have another Rural Housing Trust Fund round, per your question, for Western Kentucky for multifamily development. And so it'll be focused on the counties designated, on the western side of the state. And we will do this notice of funds available with our tax-exempt bonds and what are called 4% low-income housing tax credits, the Rural Housing Trust Fund money, possibly other subsidy from KHC, and the Community Development Block Grant disaster recovery money that's come to DLG. The Western Kentucky money is available in Kentucky, and so we want to include those dollars in a notice of funds available for multifamily developers. And just wanted to give you all kind of an image of some of the rental projects we have funded with this kind of money. The top is senior apartments that are in Shepherdsville, in Bullitt County, and then the bottom is a duplex that we have funded in Owsley County. Again, I'm just trying to give you all an image about what some of the projects might end up looking like. Okay, so that disaster recovery money that's coming from HUD, for Western Kentucky, the funds are in place. All the mechanics have happened, and they have been doing funding announcements. That's flowing through the Department for Local Government. If you'll go to the next slide. So it's $123.9 million for the 21 tornado and some flooding in East Kentucky. So there's actually, that money is available in some East Kentucky counties, and they're applying for it now. It's flowing a little bit slowly. It's cumbersome. Every federal dollar has a 50-pound brick tied to it, is what I like to say. It's valuable. It's a lot of money, but it takes time and a lot of work to get it. For the East Kentucky 22 flooding, it's $298 million. Now that is for not just housing. It's housing, infrastructure, economic development, disaster mitigation. So there are a number of uses. Housing is one of them. It is a primary use for both buckets of money. But they don't move quickly, as I said. Next slide. So with the 22 money, an action plan has been drafted, And we, KHC drafted the housing section, because we have been tapped to administer the housing portion of those funds in East Kentucky. Because it's just gonna be complex, we have so many partners already and partnerships, and we have an ability to deploy funds relatively quickly, as hopefully we've demonstrated with the Rural Housing Trust Fund. So that action plan should be published very soon by DLG. There'll be a public comment period, and HUD has to review it and all of that. To get ready for when the funds are available, and the projection right now is that hopefully the first quarter of next year is when these dollars might flow to Kentucky, knock wood. Here's what we're doing to get ready, KHC. We have done 2 competitive procurements, one for a regional implementation partner out in East Kentucky, and we selected FAHI, which is a long-standing organization, great partner, lots of nonprofit members. And then we also selected a CDBG-DR consultant, because we've never used these funds before. We really need to make sure we stay on the right side of the rules and compliance and all that kind of stuff. And so that's an organization called SBP. And so what we have done is we have already done 4 or 5 days of intensive planning to do our program design, to do a version of what we've done with the Rural Housing Trust Fund, but it's a lot more complex, and a lot of hard decisions have to be laid out. How are we going to prioritize? When are we going to say no to some repair jobs, or that kind of stuff? So really trying to, and then how much is all this going to cost? And I can tell you that $298 million seemed like a lot of money until you started breaking it into how much for infrastructure, how much for mitigation, and just the cost of housing, and housing in East Kentucky, getting things there, getting developers there. It's expensive. So anyway, that's underway. We're really trying to be ready for when the dollars hit the ground. And just to remind you all, the great value of the Rural Housing Trust Fund is that it really fills the gap between the FEMA dollars and the Red Cross activity and this HUD money that's coming for East Kentucky. Right now, there's been some philanthropic money, but that's starting to winnow. And so this is really going to help kind of bridge that gap and keep our partners going. Many of our partners have doubled their carpentry crews. They're trying to grow their subcontractors, and so this will keep that work going before it really has to expand with the HUD dollars coming. Okay, and that's it. Thanks so much. I welcome any questions if you all have any. Thanks.
Thank you, Wendy, for that presentation. Sam, you're up.
So I just wanted to maybe facilitate a brief discussion on the future of the Rural Housing Trust Fund. So as Wendy mentioned, these dollars were appropriated by the legislature earlier this year, and it was a single appropriation of $20 million. We've already gotten $13.5 million out in single-family development funds. We expect to get the other portion of Western Kentucky funding out for multifamily, hopefully later this year. So once those funds run out, essentially all that's left for us to do is ensure compliance and make sure that the projects get completed and maintain compliance through their affordability period. But beyond that, absent additional funding from the legislature, there isn't any activity for us to do. And the way that this program was designed, obviously it's being used right now for disaster recovery, but it has the possibility to go beyond that in the future. And so, I just wanted to sort of lay out the future as it stands right now. I don't know what the legislature is going to do in the upcoming session. We've heard rumors about everything from no money to lots of money, so there's just really no way to know for sure. But I just wanted to get your all's thoughts on how we should proceed going forward, considering that we're pretty close to having allocated all of the funding that was made available to us earlier this year.
At a minimum, you all could consider, if more funding is available, that you meet virtually. I hate to bring you all here just to report on project progress and, but that's obviously for you to decide. Mm-hmm.
I see here on the agenda there's proposed meeting date of May the 1st. Is your thinking, Sam and Winston, that we ought to put that on the calendar as a potential virtual meeting date just to see how things unfold throughout the early part of the year?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. So at that point, we'll be able to, hopefully, be able to report on the Western Kentucky multifamily funding. And then, you know, it's possible that will be after the legislative session is concluded. So we'll be able to provide a report on, you know, how the fund stands after that legislative session has occurred. So we thought that timing kind of made sense.
It makes sense, perfect sense to me. The timing in particular seems right. That is Derby week, for those who are concerned about that. I think all of us can squeeze in a virtual meeting. If we need to rest.
I guess I'm a little confused on the question that you're asking. Are you asking for what this group feels is their next step, or the next step for this funding source, or maybe together?
It's a little bit of
Okay.
both.
All right.
So, you know, we are charged with administering this fund, and we have done that for the single-family portion of what we intended to allocate. And then we are going to allocate funds to multifamily, but there's no new funds coming in.
Right.
You know, with a lot of our other sources, like the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, there's a steady stream of funding that comes in. So we constantly have work. We have to decide how we're going to allocate those funds and who we're going to award those funds to on a continual basis. That's not really this program doesn't yet have that continual source of funding. So you know, it's really just informing you of that fact, and also asking if you have any thoughts about how we proceed given those circumstances.
And at our last meeting, the legislators that were here, Robbie Mills and John Turner,
Right.
did talk about the possibility of, you know, pushing for more. That was a long time ago, no idea what, you know, and that's before Robbie was a candidate for lieutenant governor and all of that. So, you know, it could be very different now, but just acknowledging that what we will have to report to you all after we do the Western Kentucky Notice of Funds Available for multifamily will just be progress on projects and the expenditures, but no future funding rounds.
There's been no discussions of a permanent funding source to fund this. Maybe
Not that we know
To
of,
our
yeah.
knowledge, not with KHC, I will say that. It's possible that, you know, the legislature is considering it on their own, but I'm not aware of any conversations that have happened with KHC.
So how much of the other trust fund that has a regular stream of affordable housing, that has its own advisory committee, is the rural housing issue addressed? Is it 50-50? Is it in conjunction with geography? How is that?
I would say the lion's share of our Affordable Housing Trust Fund dollars go to rural communities or smaller towns that might not be technically rural, but it's like Hopkinsville or that kind of a Paducah.
There's a statutory mandate
Yes.
that at least I think
40.
40% of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund be allocated to rural areas.
We never have any issue meeting that.
So, right, so essentially, if the legislation wanted to, they could increase funds for rural housing by just increasing funds to the affordable housing. Okay.
I think, so they could do that. There's a difference though between those two sources of funding, and like Wendy was talking about, this source of funding goes up to a much higher income level. We can serve a lot larger, broader population with these funds. So it's really just a matter of how the legislature wants to restrict the funds, whether they want it to be more restrictive to lower income Kentuckians, or, and if that's the case, then they would probably fund the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, or if they want it to be more flexible but only focusing on rural, it would make sense to appropriate it.
Right.
to
I mean, in a way,
rural.
this, given new funding theoretically, it could be workforce housing for rural communities, you know, it could
So
really.
it could adapt itself. But it can also, I mean, we're very well aware that even with 298 million, that's not going to meet our housing need, even in the disasters area. So it could still be earmarked for disaster recovery in both locations.
Yeah.
But eventually that would go away for the future
Yeah.
of this, in which case we would need to find that particular nuance that made this group different
Mhm.
than the Affordable Care Trust.
And one thing to bear in mind is that the current Affordable Housing Trust Fund is not funded via appropriation. It's funded via transaction fees and real estate. So there's no funding appropriated for housing on a large scale level on an ongoing basis by the legislature.
Yeah, it's a fee on each real estate transaction that funds the, and because nobody's selling their houses right now because of the interest rate environment, whereas we usually get 1.2 to 1.5 million every quarter in affordable housing trust fund revenue, it's now around $900,000. So it's that source has gone way down with transfers going down.
Well, an appropriation is a boom bust also. I mean, the state budget is.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this is an example of that,
Yeah.
right? This
Yeah.
is it's a reprogramming of those disaster recovery state dollars, and we've got it, and then we'll.
We know that there will be perhaps multiple sources that will be requesting additional funds for housing, affordable housing, that will ultimately be presented to the state legislature. The easiest to illustrate is in Metropolitan Louisville. The mayor there held a press conference a week or two ago in which he indicated that, they were seeking substantial additional funding to assist for affordable housing in Louisville. And in doing so, I think his press release at least made reference to the need for affordable housing across the state, and that maybe 20% of those funds be dedicated or allocated to Louisville. So even what the mayor of Louisville is asking would, if enacted, would provide, funding for the rural part of the state as well as the urban part of the state. But we don't have any insight into, how that's going to be received by the legislature at all. And again, we've heard our share of rumors, but everybody hears those, and we don't put much confidence in any of that.
Well, I think it sounds like we may have a consensus that a May 1st meeting would make sense to put it on the calendar. And, Winston, your staff, in conjunction with the members of the committee as they exist at that time, can evaluate whether to have that meeting or cancel it. Any other discussion about that or any other topics before we bring our meeting to a conclusion?
I'm just curious, on the projects that you funded, did they bring other resources to the table, or is this 100% financing?
It's 100% construction financing.
It's 100%
But for the single-family homes, there will be a mortgage that takes out at least a portion of that.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then that's where you said it could be recycled?
That's how it will recycle, yes.
So a percentage, like 40–60% of it may be recycled back?
It varies unit to unit. We
Okay.
actually did an analysis on it. It all depends on the target audience, really.
Yeah.
For example, Housing Development Alliance is targeting these funds to serve the most needy folks. So they are basically going to be maximizing all available funds for subsidy. Whereas some of the other partners are planning on selling to more middle and or upper lower income folks. So there'll be program income generated at sale because these folks will be bringing a standard mortgage to the table.
Okay, so there's the potential for these funds to recycle multiple times, maybe over a long period of time?
Yeah, we don't
depending, like,
anticipate a
if
lot
it's
of-
just construction financing?
A lot of
within
program
an amount.
income at the end, the way most of the partners in their system design, they maximize the use of the program income to generate the number of units they're proposing.
Right.
So
And the unit numbers and contemplate,
use of program income.
yeah, that recycling to do more units.
So I would say if you.
So like the unit numbers that we showed in the table
Like the 22?
already assume, when they apply and their sources of uses, they have to show recycling, if they're gonna
So
recycle funds.
This is recycled,
Yeah.
so these units are actually as a result of recycling money as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I anticipate we might see at the conclusion of the grant periods for all these awardees, at the best case scenario, maybe $1.5 to $2 million coming back in program income on a permanent basis. That would be on the high end, if I had to guess it.
Joe, I would just propose that for as long as we can keep this advisory council in some way alive without dismantling, that puts us in the best position of taking advantage of any opportunity that avails itself, because we were able to say we have a structure in place to move, so that we just continue to virtually meet, and even beyond when we hear about the next allocation, but just a progress report so that for at least the next year through 2024, we're in a position to respond with a structure, an advisory structure, as opposed to looking at dismantling, especially if it is a convenient factor as that. Because obviously, rural housing and the issues are immense and need to be addressed, and you know, I think all of us are desperate to see solutions to that. And it'd be nice if this one turned out to be one that, you know, bore fruit. Additional fruit.
And I believe the legislation kind of requires that we
Yes.
keep this body and we meet twice a year, even if it's virtual, that it has to, even if there's not dollars, that we're supposed to keep the body.
Yeah, even if there's no money appropriated in the future, this advisory council will stay in place. So, and provide advice about rural housing matters to Kentucky Housing Corporation.
Oh, well, that's, okay, okay. So even if every single unit is built, we're
Yeah.
still meeting?
Until
Because,
the General
Well,
Assembly tells us not to.
right, because the
Yes.
trust fund was created separately from the
Okay.
funding.
Sure.
It is a body that will outlive the funding, the current funding.
Okay.
And it is
That's cool.
designed to receive funding from other sources. So if, for example, you know, some charity or organization wanted to fund housing in rural Kentucky and said, you know, here's $100 million, then the advisory committee would continue, and it could go into the rural trust fund, which would obligate us to administer those funds effectively and fairly.
And are you guys actively looking for those funds, or is that something that the advisory committee needs to be trying to track? I mean, because I
We've
understand.
had a little bit going on, Sandy.
Okay. But that's what you know, that's what I'm asking, you know, is like, you know, who's trying to bring those donors and opportunities to the table, you know, and, yeah.
I'm just kidding.
No, I understand exactly, and I know there's limitations on the nonprofit for even, no, you can educate the General Assembly, but you can't lobby the General Assembly, so there's limitations there, so I just asking.
There are a lot of charitable organizations that are out there attempting to raise money for disaster recovery, in particular in East and West Kentucky, and have done so.
Sure.
I mean, the Team Kentucky effort by the governor, I think that was, I've forgotten what the numbers were for Western Kentucky, but it's 50 million, or in and for Eastern Kentucky, I think it was more like 10 million.
Close to 15, I think.
15, okay. And then there are other organizations out there that are attempting to raise money for those efforts that are ongoing. I mean, building housing on some of the high ground sites that have been in the press. I'm sure most of you all are familiar with. There are nonprofits that are seeking funds to build additional housing above and beyond what we anticipate will be available in the disaster relief funding that will be administered.
And I would also add, if you're interested in getting involved in the legislative side of things, the Homeless and Housing Coalition of Kentucky has built a coalition of community-based organizations to advocate for increased affordable housing funding in the upcoming session, as well as Tiffany's organization does that work as well.
Mm-hmm. And I do believe that some of the FAHI and or its members are going to push for more RHTF now that the announcements have come out.
And their Housing Can't Wait Coalition, they have an active website, and they're continuing to lobby as well.
Yeah, but is this committee just gonna be landlocked on the counties that we're focusing on now?
It's all funding dependent, so if we got a new source of funds that didn't have like the disaster
Right.
focus, then we could do all rural.
So any kind of
areas.
new funds that come in here, we could say, take it to even Fleming County, where I'm from,
Mhm.
correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I have another question. My brain's just clicking away. So with the applications that you got submitted, is there any indication that they did have capacity to do more if the resources were higher? I mean, if let's say it was 20 million that went to Eastern Kentucky in total, did they Would there have been? a
Because we
bigger
capped
ask?
the ask, I just don't know. I mean, I know that many of the partners on that list are gearing up for the disaster recovery money that's coming, so they aim to do much more scale than just what we have on this table. So I would presume for many of them, yes, and a lot of them are in a growth mode of trying to grow their own construction teams and their subs,
Right.
or look at alternate construction models.
So with the construction that's been built, are they hitting the target dollar amounts? I know that the materials have come down in construction, but labor continues to be very high. Concrete continues to be very high. With the planning, like you were saying, of this succession, are they hitting their targets, or are they gonna be short?
So with this money, of course, it's too early to say, right? But on most of our single-family projects, we have the ability of having a little wiggle room. If costs come in way over, it's all got to be documented. The area where we're seeing the most cost escalation, where because they're bigger projects, it jumps the gap a lot, is in multifamily. So when you're building an apartment complex of 40 to 100 units, let's just say, if one thing goes up by 10%, well, really it's 40 to 100 things that went up, right?
Right.
And that's where we see these gigantic gaps that come and really confront the project with, is it going to be feasible? Is there going to be something, and when you add to that the interest rates,
Right.
right? And so if something drags out, the cost of development keeps going up. That's where we're seeing the biggest gaps appear, where it's a go, no-go issue as to whether or not they can get more funds.
Right. The multifamily units, do you have people that have applied for this money, you just haven't put it out yet, or?
We have folks who are very interested. It's Tiffany's association. Many of her members are very interested. The challenge for us is we've got to have the disaster recovery funds that DLG oversees. That has to be part of it, or the projects won't work. That's going to fill in a lot of project gaps. And just, they're overwhelmed with all of their funding. So getting that to time out so we can make it available. But we have many developers who've expressed interest.
And I do know that multifamily, we have a lot of HOPE loans going through the bank, and we get them approved, and nothing happens for a year or two. So, I mean, I understand that. Have you all looked to see, with an organization like HOPE, to see if there's any projects that are going on right now, and then just knock out, I hate it for the bank, but knock out that bank and you all become the financer of it? Because that would be.
I don't know if we do some
So,
lending, but.
But usually our sources are sort of like the last mile, right? Like getting, we work a lot with HOPE in our multifamily projects, and we just don't have the scale that a private bank does to provide, we don't have the resources to provide like a first mortgage for a multifamily project. So it's really, we're really hoping to help a few different projects with that $4.5 million or $5 million in Western Kentucky, rather than like putting, using that as like a substitute for a private bank. Because we're expecting, if you got like a 100-unit project, that's just not going to be enough. And we don't really have any other sources that we can use.
In a 100-unit project, it's gonna be pretty close to that $5 million.
Right,
With interest rates, yeah.
Have you ever thought about hedging your money and putting it up for collateral for a bank to do it? It would entice the bank to do it more, and if the bank did its job, right, it should all work out in the end, because the construction job should be complete and you wouldn't have actually used any of your all's money.
I never thought about that.
We've never been asked to do that before. I don't know if that's something that developers need, or.
That would lower the interest rate.
Yeah.
Sure.
Mhm.
For example, on CD, just simple CD loan, we only charge 2% over whatever the stated rate is. I still have CDs that are paying 0.4%. So that means a 2.4% loan that, might be able to stretch the dollar out a little bit.
Yeah. It's like a guarantee in a way.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Better than a guarantee, because the cash is
Right,
going
it's-
to be
It's
in
in
the
the
bank.
bank, yeah.
Right, it's a
Right.
linked deposit, I guess, or,
Yes.
yeah.
We'll explore that.
Yeah. And I don't think anything in the legislation prohibits it,
Right.
but,
Any other comments, questions, topics for discussion? Okay, well, I know everyone here joins me in thanking the KHC staff for their professionalism in pulling this together and all the good work that you do for us, so thank you for that. If there's no other topics, I'll seek a motion to adjourn. Mr. Womack has a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that. That's my goal.
Okay. With that motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we stand adjourned. Thank you all.
Again, thanks for coming and
Yes.
participating and for your thoughts and suggestions.